Hello, everyone, and greetings from the Global Future Cities program, and welcome to a particularly special month, Urban October. My name is Greg Mextroth, and I will be your moderator for today's session, which focuses on decarbonization efforts in mobility and urban planning. For those that don't know me, I'm a mobility and urban planning expert at UN Habitat's Urban Lab, working within the Global Future Cities program as a focal point for the Philippines interventions and for program-wide capacity building efforts. It is my pleasure to be moderating this event, and thank you for giving me your time and attention. So before getting started today, just a few housekeeping items. First, please note that this event is being recorded, so let us know in the chat box if you do not want to be recorded. If you have questions or comments during today's presentations, please utilize the chat box and we will collate them for the Q&A session at the end of the event. Please ensure your microphones are on mute while others are speaking. And finally, during the Q&A, we do encourage active participation, so please utilize the hand raise tool and wait to be called upon. Today's event kicks off the Global Future Cities program's Urban October Knowledge Sharing Series of 2021. This particular event aligns with World Habitat Day's theme of accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. The objective of today's event is to present innovative and varying methods of decarbonization. Firstly, Peter Turner from the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office and Naomi Hugevors from UN Habitat will provide introductory remarks. Then, after a brief audience engagement, 3 program partners will present their respective experience on carbon neutrality efforts, followed by a Q&A session. At the end, we want to obtain feedback on the effectiveness of this session, so please stick around and provide your feedback. I'd now like to turn to Peter Turner, Global Future Cities Program Manager from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, to provide background information on the program itself. Peter has brought his own slides, so Peter, can you please turn on your camera and share your screen?
Peter, I think you're on mute.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you. Good start. Hi, so welcome everybody. I'm delighted to be here for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office and to talk about this Urban October session, to talk about the Global Future Cities programme. And it's a really exciting time to be in this field, and the key for us is that back in about 2017 we developed this Global Future Cities programme, and the aims were to work in a select number of middle-income countries to help understand how we could increase local prosperity, quality of life, and reduce levels of poverty and gender inequality, and create mutually beneficial two-way trade opportunities. And of course, part of that was also to work to improve delivery of the UN development goals, Sustainable Development Goals, in particular number 11, sustainable cities and communities, but also others, including of course climate action, which is key for us, even more key for us today. So why cities? Well, I think we all know that there's a rapid urbanisation continuing today in the world. 2% of the world's land surface is cities, but over 50% of the world's population live in cities, and that's increasing still. And climate change, affects cities, and so it's a real key area where we can make a big difference. Cities drive economic growth, and they provide great opportunities for inclusive economic growth. And of course, they can affect decarbonisation. Any efforts to try and improve decarbonisation are key. So what was the what was the programme scope? Well, we had 3 main interventions. They're in transportation to support cities to develop and improve transport systems. And of course, this is a key part of trying to reduce carbonisation. For example, we've had bicycle schemes to introduce bicycle cycleways, pedestrianisation schemes. We've also had one of our second key programme scope was in the urban planning area. Typically, a lot of middle-income countries have cities that have developed organically rather than been planned. So a key part of our offer was to try and get improved planning, and in particular working to use the power of data to try and revise plans and introduce plans. And then finally, resilience. So in particular here, these are strategies to help address the impact of climate change, for example, flooding in Vietnam, and ensure development overall is sustainable. And obviously this is particularly important for our session today. So just briefly to close where we're working, well, we're working globally, as the programme name suggests. So we're over 10 countries and 19 cities. So 6 countries in Southeast Asia, and then also 2 in Africa, so Nigeria and South Africa, and then also Turkey and Brazil. So really excited to hear the rest of the session, and in this great event, Urban October. So many thanks for everybody who's joined, and I'll hand back to Greg to introduce the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it. We now call on our second introduction speaker, Naomi Hugevorst. She's the Senior Urban Planner with UN Habitat and Global Future Cities Program Manager on behalf of the UN. Naomi, can you turn on, please?
Yes, I hope you can all hear me and that my camera is on. Otherwise, please let me know. Thanks, Greg, and also Peter Turner for your introduction remarks. First of all, happy World Habitat Day, I should say. It was yesterday, but yeah, also welcome to Urban October. Welcome to all participants, stakeholders from the Future Cities program, but hopefully also other urban stakeholders. As Greg said, I'm Naomi Hugevorst, and I'm working as an urban planner at UN Habitat's Urban Lab and co-managing the Future Cities program. And today we gather at the start of Urban October, a month of discussion around sustainable urbanization globally. And this year, as Mamie mentioned, it's focused around taking climate action in our cities, sparked by the upcoming climate conference, COP26 in Glasgow in November. I will brief you shortly on why the Global Future Cities program is actively participating in this urban dialogue coming month. As Peter mentioned, we have a lot of cities engaged and projects on urban planning, mobility and resilience in many cities, so there's a lot to share. As UN Habitat, we've been engaged for over 3 years now as a role in the role of strategic and capacity building partner to the UK FCDO to promote the implementation of SDGs, build local capacities, and also to create knowledge based on all the lessons learned, and to make sure that knowledge is being shared between program partners and also together here with a global audience. So therefore, the partners of the program will be actively contributing to Urban October, sharing collective experiences and expertise on climate change mitigation and also resilience through a calendar of over 15 events this year. I don't know if you can switch to the next slide. So we developed a flyer on all the activities that are taking place, linked to the activities of the Global Future Cities program. So if you can maybe go to the next slide. So there are events organized, like today's session by us, by unhabitat, but also Mod McDonald, for example, together with Malaysia, is organizing a session from red to green, from COVID-19 to green recovery. And if you go to the last slide, there will be also another knowledge sharing session aligned with World Cities Day on urban resilience. But we will share the flyer with you so you can all register for the events where you're interested in. But to focus on today's event, we are kicking off with the first knowledge sharing session of this year. And that's aligned, as Greg said, with World Habitat's theme, accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. And this event will focus on these innovative ways that the partners aim to decarbonize mobility and urban planning in their regions. So Urban October is highlighting this urgency of taking climate action in cities, as limiting global warming will require far-reaching transitions in cities in the coming decades. Just a few facts and figures to share that urgency. We all know that hopefully that 55% of the world's population live in cities, and spatial inequality is still occurring, and also equal access to basic services like urban mobility are some of the key issues that also the Future Cities program is addressing. 75% of CO2 emissions are coming from our cities, and 20% are coming from transport, with road emissions being the biggest subset. Also, 14 million people become homeless every year, and also many people die of natural disasters. So, but also Peter mentioned there are a lot of opportunities in cities. Also, 70% of the GDP is created in cities. So sustainable and viable investments in climate action is key. So hopefully we can contribute to sort of unlocking that role that cities can play in the pathways to net zero through low carbon urban planning and mobility, making sure we leave no one behind. So that's what I want to share today. Thank you all partners for presenting, other participants for joining this session. I hope it will inspire you to share and learn towards a more sustainable urban future, and encourage you to contribute to cross-learning. I think it's really important, and that's why we are here today together. I wish you all a fruitful session. Thank you all.
Thanks, Naomi and Peter. I really appreciate that. And it's really quite nice to frame exactly why we're here and just how critical this conversation is. So before our presentations, I'd like to ask that everybody take part in a short survey so we can gauge interest in decarbonization. On your screen, you should see a QR code. You can scan that with your phones. If you don't have a phone on you, you can also go to menti.com and type the numerical code at the bottom of the screen. I'll give everyone a couple seconds to do that. So the question is, when you think of decarbonization of mobility and urban planning, what word comes to mind? You can type up to 2 answers. Try to keep it short, and we'll see what the audience has to say. Seeing a lot of public transport. That's the big one so far. Low carbon, sustainability. A bit of walking, non-motorized. Electric cars are in there, EV, low emission, compact urban development. access. Fantastic. Looks like the big winners continue to be public transport, low carbon, green, all very timely answers. Certainly hope that today's discussion broadens the conversation to include innovative modalities that perhaps aren't necessarily top of mind, perhaps some things that might not be showing up here. So our first presenter is Kamisa Mohd Ghazali, and she will discuss the importance of community outreach and education in decarbonization. Kamisa is Senior Vice President of Resilient Environment for the Iskandar Regional Development Authority in Iskandar, Malaysia. Kamisa, over to you.
Hi. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Greg, for the introduction. Well, before I start, I'd like to just share with everyone that Iskandar Malaysia is also part of the UK Prosperity Fund Global Future Cities program, looking at 2 interventions on smart integrated mobility management and also enabling condition for evidence-based urban and transport planning. We've shared that project in last year, Urban October, and this year we love to share, Iskandar Malaysia initiative towards low carbon society. Next, please. Well, I'm sure the participants today come from all over the world, not just Iskandar Malaysia. So I guess it's good to introduce Iskandar Malaysia. Iskandar Malaysia is located, it's an economic region located at the southern part of Johor, Malaysia, neighboring Singapore. We have a total area of 2,217 square kilometer, which are 3 times of the size of Singapore, covering 5 local authorities. Iskandar Regional Development Authority, where I'm attached to, is a Malaysian federal government statutory body with core functions to plan, promote, and facilitate the development of Iskandar Malaysia. Next one. When we talk about low carbon society blueprint, we started our journey in low carbon way back in 2009. And I remember in 2009, Malaysia committed to a voluntary reduction up to 40% in terms of emission intensity of GDP by year 2020 compared to 2005 level. And Malaysia also actually in COP21 in Paris renewed their commitment to a reduction up to 45% in terms of emission intensity to GDP by 2030. Well, for Iskandar Malaysia, as we continue our journey, we prepare and we launch our low carbon society blueprint 2025 at COP19 in Doha. The blueprint presents a comprehensive climate change mitigation policies and detailed strategies to guide development in Iskandar Malaysia. 12 actions and 281 programs were identified under the subject of green economy, green community, and green environment. Next, please. Well, I can confidently say that Iskandar Malaysia is the pioneer of low carbon in Malaysia. In less than 10 years, we have managed to complete the LCS development cycle from science to policy, action, and monitoring. The low carbon society blueprint of Iskandar Malaysia is widely recognized at local, national, and international level. It communicates our commitment to combat climate change. Through our yearly participation at COP and UNFCCC side events, we do gather a lot of exposure on low carbon and green agenda. IRDA is also a member of GCOM, Global Covenants of Mayors for Climate and Energy since 2017. And We continue to attract city-to-city partnership and collaboration, especially with the Japanese cities such as Toyama City, Kyoto City, and also Kitakyushu. But we also bring a lot of interest from other regions too. Next one. We are actually pleased to note that Malaysia have just launched its National Low Carbon City Roadmap, and at the same time, the state government, the Johor state government, has also launched the Johor Sustainability Policy and also Johor Sustainable Development Plan 2030. So having these two documents, I guess, it is timely for us in Iskandar, Malaysia, to review and update our documents, and therefore this year we are looking at improving, at revising the document, updating the document with the collaboration and partnership with 5 local authorities in Iskandar, Malaysia. Low carbon and green agenda are also embedded in the state structural and local plans. Next one. Well, next one, please, Greg. Thank you. Well, Iskandar, Malaysia started implementation of LCS programs since 2013, and more than 60 programs have actually been completed, with 214 ongoing. Based on the 2017 GHG inventory, the emission intensity for GDP shows significant decrease of 13%. And we continue our efforts and initiative. And for 2020 and 2021, we are continuing our participation in GCOM, CDP cities reporting, and recently participated in the WWF's One Planet City Challenge. We also continue with our GHG inventory, which is actually very important in measuring as to how we perform against the commitment that we make. And we also, at the same time, continue with our programs in terms of capacity building, relating to building energy monitoring and reporting system, and also Gaia, Green Accord Initiative Award, a form of non-fiscal incentive that encourage environmental sustainability and stewardship by private organizations. We recently signed NDA with Alliance EcoLife to end plastic waste, and at the same time continue with our Green Community Carbon Reduction Program in order to spread awareness and embrace low carbon lifestyle among community. Next one. Well, there are several components that we look at when it comes to decarbonization, from initiative related to natural resources, built environment, green community, and also, the need for climate reporting and recognition. However, the focus of my presentation today would be on green community and climate reporting and recognition. Well, I will start with a green community. Next one. Next. Okay. One of the most successful program, I would say, in green community will be the EcoLife Challenge. It aims to actually create awareness on low carbon society among primary school students, teachers, and also their families, So this program basically, is to foster LCS awareness, disseminate knowledge, share with them good practices of LCS, and also, in terms of how to reduce carbon emission. And of course, ultimately, the goal is to create low carbon society. Next one. We started the program in 2013 with the participation of 23 schools and 3,700 students. And over the years, it has gradually increased. The EcoLife Challenge looks into several areas, electricity, water, comparing the amount, looking at, the saving in terms of CO2 equivalent. And then we also look at recycling, transportation, and also renewable energy. So it is a very exciting activities where normally previously, there'll be a lot of visits by the sponsors and partners to the school. But again, when it comes, when we are actually hit by the pandemic in 2020, we actually make some changes in terms of how we actually run the program. Next one. In 2020, we adopted new form for the program using Google Classroom and also Facebook Live. We successfully implemented the program with the participation of 546 schools and about 55,000 students. And through that particular program last year, about 700,000 kilograms CO2 equivalent was reduced through the saving on electricity bills, water bills, and also recycling activities. A total of Ringgit Malaysia 101,300 was saved and earned by the participating schools. So it's actually very exciting for those schools who have been successful in their performance, actually also get prizes, from the sponsors. Well, next one. For this year, in 2021, we are continuing the program with more interesting features through digitization and also gamification with the support from UNDP Malaysia Accelerator Lab. And this year we are anticipating 906 schools throughout the Johor state with an estimated students of 100,000 students to participate in the program. And we have launched actually the website in August 2021. Next one. Well, this program has actually received several awards and recognitions. Among others, Okayama ESD Award, Global Prize 2018 by the Okayama City. And we are also have a special mention as one from the 61 success cases of sustainable development solution in the Rising to Challenge Malaysia's contribution to the SDGs. So it's actually, we gather a lot of attention and also support from our stakeholders. And to actually run this program, there is a need for us to work with multi-stakeholders, and we work with the education department, we work with SEDA Malaysia and the SWM environment. We also have sponsors coming from the private sectors, and also we have a lot of what you call support from the universities, University Technology Malaysia. Next one. And for the second program that I want to touch in terms of green community is the Green Community Carbon Reduction programs that aims to encourage community to embrace low carbon lifestyle. And we also undertake low carbon accounting exercise to quantify carbon emission saved in terms of kg CO2 through waste recycling and water and also electricity saving. Next one. So there are several programs under the Green Community Carbon Reduction Program. For example, the one in Rumah Iskandar Malaysia. Rumah Iskandar Malaysia is a transit home initiative by IRDA that has been designed based on crime prevention through environmental design, SEPTEC. So since 2019, we have actually started a campaign on waste segregation and also undertake several recycling competition. And in 2001, RIM, the community in Rumah Iskandar Malaysia have also started water and electricity competition. So based on the year 2020, the recyclable collected is about 30,000 kilograms. And we also have low carbon initiative by the local council, Iskandar Puteri Rendah Carbon. It is actually spearheaded by Majlis Bandaraya Iskandar Puteri. So this carbon awareness campaign include low carbon calendar competition, drive-through events to drop recycling item, fabric recycling movement, and also low carbon grants for community. And the low carbon grants for community spread on a lot of many types of projects, from urban farming, from renewable energy type of things like the use of LED, solar, and also a lot of awareness program also as part and parcel of their programs. Next one. We also have this program called Kawan Iskandar Malaysia, the Friends of Iskandar Malaysia. So for your information, Kawan Iskandar Malaysia is actually an intervention under the Social Economic Mobility Strategy. The program empowers the community in order to increase the targeted group's income via social enterprise. So we provide allocation to the community for low carbon infrastructure such as rainwater harvesting, solar panel, LED lighting, and also biodigester and more. So in total, about 9,000 kilograms CO2 has been reduced from the green elements at 4 Kawan Iskandar Malaysia site, and about 2,000 ringgit, 2,600 ringgit have been saved and collected during 3 months in terms of data collection when we monitor the performance of these particular sites. And the last one, in fact, when it comes to Green Community Carbon Reduction Program, is on Green Living and Action Short Movies, or GLAM. This is to gauge the understanding and acceptance on LCS from community perspectives. So it is a series of awareness and information sharing on LCS and SDGs, which actually was uploaded on social media to provide information. And participants come from all over Malaysia, and the content actually focus on the community's perspective on their understanding of LCS, low carbon society. So next one. Next one, with a lot of initiative, I guess we can't run away on the need for, climate reporting, and also some of the recognition that we have received based on what the initiative and intervention that we have done. Iskandar Malaysia greenhouse gas inventories actually mark significant milestones in tracking the performance of commitments made during the launching of our low carbon society blueprint in Doha, Qatar. We continue our commitment to reduce our carbon emission intensity by 58% by year 2025. And I believe Iskandar Malaysia is the first in the region to use the internationally recognized Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventories, GPC, in 2016. Next one. Emission intensity per GDP in year 2017 for Iskandar Malaysia have shown a decrease of 13% from its base year 2010 emission intensity. So with the support and commitment from the 5 local authorities in Iskandar Malaysia, we are currently this year undertaking and preparing a basic plus reporting level, which comprises of stationary energy, transportation, waste, IPU, and also AFOLU sectors. well, this is actually will be quite comprehensive. We are almost completing the GHG inventory now, and I believe soon we will have a report ready in relation to our Iskandar Malaysia greenhouse gas inventory for the year 2017 and 2018. Okay, the next one is that I want to share is on our participation in Global Covenants of NEAS. Well, we have been officially accepted as a member in 2017, and this actually shows or based on our commitment in reducing greenhouse gas emission, identifying and adapting to risks associated with climate change, and increasing access to clean and affordable energy. There have been several jointly organized training on climate change adaptation, together with European Commission and International Urban Cooperation, IUC Asia. Progress reports on our climate commitment is published publicly, and achievements are actually recognized by a system of badges that are shared with the global community. So as a result of this sharing commitment and also our efforts towards climate and energy, probably you can go to the next slide. I think based on the result from data reported through the CDP ECLI Unified Reporting System, the GCOM Southeast Asia Secretariat recognized the Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Initiative by Iskandar Malaysia, and we have and IRDA have been awarded both the GCOM Mitigation and Adaptation badges. Next one. Well, Iskandar Malaysia shares a long-term vision to combat climate change. We have demonstrated commitment with full transparency on our climate action by disclosing and reporting our climate action plans and goals, climate mitigation and adaptation through CDP Cities Reporting Platform. We also collaborate with other cities and international organizations such as WRI, C40, GCOM and ECLI to accelerate our own climate action. Next one. Well, in 2020, we are actually one of 88 cities that have made it to the 2020 A list. So Iskandar Malaysia is recognized, and have received Score A leadership, the highest band score in CDP cities reporting. And this is the second year that Iskandar Malaysia made it to the CDP Cities A list for its leadership and transparency on climate action. So it has been a very interesting journey for even a lot of us in IRDA, and we gather a lot of support from our stakeholders. When we started, we do not have anything to refer to. I mean, locally to other cities in relation to low carbon, we receive a lot of help, from Japanese government, from our local universities through various collaboration and partnership in charting our journey in low carbon society. So it has been a very fruitful journey, and we truly appreciate our partners in actually delivering the low carbon and green agenda in Iskandar Malaysia. With that, I thank you and I pass it back to Greg. Greg, you are muted.
Thanks for that. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kamusa. That was such a robust education outreach campaign. It's great to see so many different tools, from small interventions to large interventions, top down and bottom up. Thanks for sharing.
You're most welcome.
So I'd now like to turn to our second presenter, Andrew Pickford, who is Executive Director at Ernst & Young Transactions in Hong Kong. And he's going to be presenting on smart ticketing technology in Ho Chi Minh City. So whereas Commonwealth focused on education and outreach to decarbonize, Andrew will focus on the role technology can play to decarbonize. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Next slide, please. And again, please. So this will be a quick walkthrough of a part completed 28-month project in Ho Chi Minh. I'll give a quick introduction to smart ticketing and the intervention that is being funded by the UK government. Then also introduce you to the scope of the intervention, provide some results, and then I think maybe the highest value section would actually be on challenges, key risks and lessons learned, and I'll finish off with some recommendations for any cities that are thinking or actually partway through implementing similar schemes in their respective cities. Next slide, please. And again. Thank you. So just a brief introduction to Ho Chi Minh. The city is larger than New York, actually. I hadn't appreciated that till I did my research a few days ago. It's similar to Nanjing in China and similar to London in Europe. So London is actually Europe's largest city, just to give you some scale. The pre-pandemic growth of Ho Chi Minh was around 6.5% per annum. Vietnam itself was only 3.5%. So you can see that both Vietnam, but in particular Ho Chi Minh, is certainly a high growth environment. And the quality of urban transport is a major issue in Ho Chi Minh. That's one of the downsides of economic growth. Until we find a way to decouple transport growth from economic growth, we will be saddled with congestion. And of course, public transport is one of those solutions to maintain mobility whilst maintaining economic vitality in the long term. So that's really what the context in which we sit, and accessibility drives sustainability of public transport. There are a lot of projects in Ho Chi Minh, large holes in the ground, many projects coming to completion also. So it's an area of high activity when it comes to infrastructure deployments in metro, in bus rapid transit, buses being the predominant form of transport in Ho Chi Minh currently. Of course, while we do this, we need to make sure that we bring everyone up to speed, and the reflecting gender and social inclusivity is critical for that. Next slide, please. So this is where the smart ticketing project intervention fits in. The policy target is to increase public transport mode share from 4% to in excess of 25%, and some figures refer to 35 to 45%, through a combination of new infrastructure and service improvements. So it's not just about the hardware, it is about the software, the operating regimes, the institutional framework, the public acceptance, etc., to enable that. So we shouldn't just focus upon the hard civil engineering or even the smart ticketing system itself. There is more to a public transport system, of course. Currently, it's bus dominated, it's coordinated, it's refined, it's working well. It's getting stuck, of course. Bus operations are suffering from increasing congestion, and the response has been in many cases, to adopt private transport, such as motorcycles. So the UK government intervention, as mentioned by a keynote speaker, is to establish a framework whereby public transport works as part of a decarbonisation agenda. Next slide, please. So this is where it started for us in December 2019. This is where we kicked off. The project is, the lead contractor is Mott MacDonald. I represent Ernst & Young, the project manager, and we have a team within EY and Mott's in Singapore to deliver this. We're aligned with SDG 11.2, which is to provide access to safe, affordable, accessible and sustainable public transport. And it is transport for all. In other words, it sounds a bit glib, but nobody should get left behind. And actually the business case is better for it, of course, by considering all users equally. So the scope is really to provide technical assistance and in early stages of implementation support to implement a smart ticketing regime. And the regime itself includes the system plus other components which I will introduce later. Next slide, please. So where does this intervention fit in decarbonisation? Well, it's easy to discuss public transport, and that really underpins this. So our job, by providing one of those technical enablers, but as I said, it's not just technical, but at least physically a technology enabler to make public transport more convenient. Smart ticket means you don't carry cash, although you may need cash to top up your card, of course. Flexible, in other words, tickets can be purchased in advance and online, or indeed just downloading an app, for example. They should be easy to use, there should be no barriers to use, and that means that users should not be occupying a lot of time in acquiring a ticket. It should be scalable and inclusive. That means whatever we do at a small scale should allow its growth and increase efficiency, and it should be quicker. In other words, it should enable public transport to be more predictable, and all we can do is to make sure people can board and disembark more quickly and actually deal with the payment process in a very transparent, simple way. Next slide, please. And again. So let's discuss the scope. Well, let's start with something which I guess we all know is really what is a smart ticket. So it exists in physical form and in virtual form. A ticket could be a dedicated branded transit card. In Hong Kong, we have the Octopus, London has Oyster, Mango is well known, etc. The contactless credit card. So that means you do not need to, you could acquire a card in your home country and travel, and then find your card works when you arrive. It could be a mobile application. So that means distribution is easy through the app stores and play stores of operating system developers via a mobile phone. Could be electronic device such as a watch. It could be other nomadic devices, a bracelet, or it could be a magnetic card. In the future, we'll have, my guess, although I admit controversially, could include biometrics and other things which reflect the user or his eligibility to travel. Next slide, please. So that sets the scene. So what we had 7 tasks, and just a brief walk through these tasks. In all good consultancy studies, you kick off with a baseline report, and that is indeed task 1. And we're looking at the starting point, the technologies that are currently in use, at least on a pilot basis, and also what's going on internationally. And also we started scoping a potential proof of concept for a back office system. The second task would develop a framework of standards, referring to both local and international standards, in the form of what we call a technical standards framework. Task 3 is looking at a complementary fair policy, and I stress that fair policy is first, and the fair policy directs and leads the implementation of the technical solution itself. Fair policy first, technology second. I'll return to that later. Task 4 is again looking at the complementary institutional frameworks to enable this predominantly centralized smart ticketing solution. Next slide, please. So task 5 is focused upon the thing which connects the smart ticketing systems themselves. So a bus operator may have a smart ticketing system, a metro system may have one also. So of course, to link them, you would implement a means of connectivity and clearing. So on the one hand, the bus operator could provide those tickets, or maybe a third party would choose to do so, and they'd be recognised by all operators. So there is that connectivity element, which is known as a back office system. And so task 5 is to develop a specification for that to enable its later tendering and implementation. Task 6 is capturing user needs, preferences. There's a survey looking at willingness to use and also willingness to pay. And task 7 is focused upon issues of governance, scaling, enforcement, and other complementary issues around contractual relationships, and also looking at the early phases of what would be a much larger public engagement. Next slide, please. So sorry to be so techy, but I'm an engineer after all, so this is closer to my heart. So this is immediately a way of describing a citywide system. Don't look too closely, I have to admit, but what this is a means of describing a solution. So at the bottom you have, well, level 1, you have the fare media, the tickets themselves. Level 2 is what you swipe the tickets on when you enter the bus. They're called validators. You may acquire a ticket through a vending machine or other point of sale terminals. Level 3 is what happens elsewhere in the bus or the station. Level 4 is where an operator consolidates the data and ticketing information. And level 5 is the thing which exists at the city to link all of the respective level 4s together. So in practice, 2 to 4 are combined. It's delivered as a black box as a single solution. So typically, level 1 is the user uses them. Level 2 to 4, the operator provides those, or a third party provides them. And level 5 is where the city engages in maybe distributing their own tickets. So what does this mean for the city itself? Next slide, please. So we'll look at the physical layout of a city. So we have on the left, as an example from Ho Chi Minh, bus rapid transit, line 1 in this case, MRT lines, that is mass rapid transit, a couple of pilots of smart ticketing systems in operation in Ho Chi Minh, and other future solutions. So historically, each one of those has been considered separately, which is okay. It's not ideal because you're duplicating functions. So the idea is in the long term that each of those solutions would maybe accept tickets issued by themselves or others, and in the long term, tickets issued by others only. You know, why duplicate functionality across all transport interventions? But we have to accept there's a roadmap to get to that point. So the long-term target is to integrate individual projects. Again, the back office system pulls that together. Next slide, please. So obviously we're producing lots of documents in our study, and one of them is the standards-based regime. So this is one of the so-called enablers, the thing which makes smart ticketing work. It's part of the environment which we're trying to create. The first is this document which prescribes standards and how these standards are connected in a way which enables individual operators to, those major infrastructure projects I mentioned, to converge around a common minimum set of requirements. So we don't believe in specifying more than is absolutely necessary. The document is the technical standards framework. It's a publicly available document, so it's available on request. It is currently in the hands of the city and it's been maintained by them with our support. Next slide, please. The next thing you need in this recipe is a back office system, which is the most efficient way of connecting these disparate solutions. And you connect them as shown here. So there's a clearinghouse, there's a transaction record manager in that grey box there. And on the right-hand side, you have all the functions. Again, don't look too closely. The city may decide to issue its own tickets, and that we call the managed service provider. So at least there's somebody that issues tickets, so we don't need to depend upon third parties, and small operators have a go-to place if they want to participate. It's easy for them to turn up, to have a validator, you know, the thing you tap your ticket on, strapped to the bus, and the operator pays a subscription per month, and suddenly in theory, within 10 minutes, he's connected to the citywide solution. So it should be accessible to everybody, the users as well as the operators themselves. So the components are the back office, the business case for the back office. It has to work economically. And again, as part of that, we are launching a proof of concepts early next year. Next slide, please. The other enablers, of course, the public need to be aware of it, the public need to engage, and we use this as an opportunity to engage groups to reflect our gender and social inclusion mandate. We are more than happy to integrate at every single level of the intervention. And the more you look, the more opportunity you find to to consider user accessibility and to support those that are more vulnerable with single trip tickets, enabling tickets to be purchased either with a mobile phone for those that have them. Those that are not lucky enough to have a mobile phone, there should be other means of acquiring those tickets. So again, we had a broad consultation program, and the results of that found their way into the technical standards framework. So, and yes, we managed to achieve that. So next slide, please. So the integration of GESI themes was critical, and we developed an action plan to keep us on track for that. Again, we set a baseline, we engage with communities. We, of course, engage with governments also to understand the playing field, also with the ambition of engaging female professionals within government where possible, and also providing capacity building opportunities. So looking at allowing members of government and other members of the people with disability community to actually join workshops. So we've had 3 workshops so far, and we've had a good attendance from all of those, and we'll continue with including everybody in those workshops. So the public outreach is a critical part to ensure meaningful consultation. It's a great way to market the solution also. In this case, no one should be left behind. Next slide, please. Capacity building is critical. So on the one hand, it's a greenfield opportunity, but greenfield means you have more capacity to build. You know, with the public, our own team, again, had to understand the nuances of government requirements, build government capacity as well. So at least we have, and that is done through collaboration. And I have to admit, the pandemic has provided some initial concerns, but actually it's actually brought together a much larger team geographically. So it's actually had some benefits in bringing together experts, and also to enable the barriers to entry to participate in meetings has actually been reduced through that. So capacity building has been is an example of where we've actually excelled in this collaborative project. Next slide, please. So just briefly, interim results. Move on, please. Thanks. We've secured approval of the TSF package. Very happy to say that. That's certainly a cause for an interim celebration. That needs to be maintained in the long term, of course, and that's now gone to the higher levels of government within the national ministries, within the Ministry of Transport, etc. We've raised the awareness of the importance of the framework, and that is a way of building that institutional convergence around those minimum common requirements. And we're developing a financial model for its sustainability and ultimately for its implementation. We've embedded the GESI themes throughout, the technical documents, the fair policy documents. We've created a potentially investable opportunity to deliver a citywide back office system. More of that in a few months' time. We've built relevant capacity. We've aligned stakeholders around common technical and operational objectives. So all of these have either been achieved or in the process of being delivered within the remaining 6 months of the project. Next slide, please. So let's quickly round up with some quick focus on key challenges, risks and lessons learned. Next slide, please. This has been born through reflection and also forward planning. And you can debate yourself as to which of these have been the most challenging for us. I mean, all projects will face these challenges, but certainly the need for continuous and early alignment of city stakeholders and actually managing expectations and vice versa, allowing the city to set their expectations and for us to report on where those expectations, will be met and when they'll be met. So again, that collaborative environment is necessary for that. Managing through the uncertainty presented by COVID-19. Vietnam has done an excellent job at all levels in actually managing the pandemic. We've had lockdown has been evident in the last 3 months. The project continues. I think to a certain extent we have that willingness, the commitment and the momentum to work through the challenges we've faced. We have actually reallocated responsibilities, we've changed the way we empower individuals, and we've implemented remote working. And also partial redesign of key tasks to work around this. So these are long-term lessons learned, which also help decarbonise our work as well. The development and delivery of intervention in parallel with public sector capacity developments. We're not launching highly technical documents. It would go nowhere. They'd be misunderstood. It's about working with the public sector on a continuous basis through all possible channels. And that requires that team building across the fence, as it were. And FCDO have been a great supporter in that process. So I take the opportunity to thank FCDO for that support they've given us. And just to wrap off up on some key recommendations. Next slide, please. I emphasise the importance of early capacity building to ensure that all stakeholders, whether they are the civil society organisations, whether government departments, have the capacity, and we do have the right people in the room at the right time to be able to discuss deliverables, to engage so meaningfully, and also to ensure that misunderstandings don't delay what is a very compressed programme, even if we have 26 months. Learn how stakeholders operate and the hierarchy in which they exist. This is a very changing environment. Ho Chi Minh is implementing a public transport authority in the next few years, which is a much more centralised structure, which suits smart ticketing actually. But we have to live with the institutional framework which we find, and we need to respect that. Capacity building workshops done remotely and in person were successful. Some things are more successful than others, but on the whole, we understand which work in which circumstances. Expectation management is mutually important, and that actually works both ways. Knowledge transfer is critical, and it has to be effective and long term. An effective GESI strategy is important, and that works at every level. And develop those GESI themes early on, and also ensure that they are developed again and maintained for the long term through all those core deliverables. So fingers crossed, if we meet again in 6 to 9 months, we should be celebrating the advent of the next steps in the implementation of the smart ticketing regime. Thank you very much, Greg. That's all from me.
Thanks, Andrew. That was fantastic. I find it really interesting that conversation about technology inevitably turns into a conversation about the need for institutional frameworks and people-focused capacity building. That was really great. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Greg.
So just before we turn on to our third presentation, just wanted to quickly note that, as my colleague Brian has already noted in the chat box, if anyone has any questions for Andrew or Kamisa, feel free to type them in. We will get that. We will have time for a Q&A at the end of the session, and we will get to them at that time. So now turning to our third and final presentation is Kayode Khalidson, who's team leader from Future Cities Nigeria, and Adiolu Auho, who's the environmental and climate change expert from Future Cities Nigeria. They will be discussing their experience in building an evidence base to guide decision making and planning for delivering sustainable water transport in Lagos. Kayode and Adiolu, can you please
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Next slide, please. What we intend to discuss this morning is really how we went about the evidence-based planning in sustainable waterways transport in Lagos. Now, this is this has been the heart of our work over the last 18 months. We have been working to try and introduce and improve water transport in Lagos State, but the evidence-based planning is just a specific aspect of that work, and I'd like to in the next 20 minutes to take you through that. Next slide, please. The project was implemented by Infrastructure Delivery International, of which I am the principal partner, working in close collaboration with Adam Smith International, who are leading this initiative. Now, just a quick glide through the presentation outline. We'll obviously go through the project background and the urban environmental challenges in Lagos, the various projects we're trying to introduce, and then obviously the market potential analysis, data analysis, demand projections, desired outcomes, and lessons learned and opportunities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, like we all know, Lagos is the economic and commercial hub of Nigeria, and Africa's largest economy, contributing 60% of Nigeria's total non-oil GDP. It's the fastest growing, 20 million people, and daily passenger trips in excess of 12 million. Now, we have a serious problem in terms of increasing population growth, urbanization, and poor infrastructure, which has obviously resulted in congestion, worsening roads, and deteriorating air quality. Lagos State in 2014, with the support of another different program, developed the master plan for Lagos State 2014 to 2032, which sets out the planning and development of transport systems, water transport, and infrastructure within Lagos. As we all know, water transport offers shorter journey times, and however, we do have a low demand, which is a major challenge for us in trying to, due to the reasons of unsafe, fragmented, and unreliable ferry services. The STMP sets out to try and improve the modal share of water transport to 20% by 2025. At the commencement of the program, which started in January last year, we're pleased to see that Lagos State showed a major commitment towards water transport by actually launching new boats for their state-owned service called Agferry. This for us was very important because it shows that we had the political will to back our initiative. Next slide, please. Now, brief overview of the project goals and objectives, the goal mainly was to determine and establish a viable and a sustainable water transport system in Lagos, which is mainly dominated by the informal operators. What we're trying to introduce was actually the equivalent of the BRT service on waterways. These are actually dedicated and improved ferry services providing scheduled services. The overall objective is to achieve the SDG goal target of 11.12, which is to provide safe and affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems for all, improving road safety, notably by expanding public transport with special attention to the needs of those in vulnerable situations, basically women, children, and people with disability and older persons. The other objectives, obviously, is to improve the quality of water transport, to provide an incremental plan and business model for the government and stakeholders. This was absolutely key because Lagos State had quite a few studies done on water transport, and what they were keen to do with this particular study is how we can take it to market. So we had to change right from the onset the terms of reference from the assignment, which was basically to conduct another viable study, to one in which we had to come up with a procurement timetable to actually procure private sector operators to provide the services in Lagos State. And a major task is the behavioral change. That's to encourage more people to use water transport system, which there is some form of an inherent phobia within Lagos towards water transport, and that's an issue we really try to focus on with regards to improving safety amongst the new systems that we're trying to introduce. And of course, mainly, very importantly, was to improve the government capacity in delivering and managing water transport. And most of our work there focused on the Transport Authority responsible for water, that's the Lagos State Waterways Authority, trying to improve their capacity, working closely with other MDAs in Lagos State who are actually responsible to actually delivering both the infrastructure for a sustainable water transport system. Next slide, please. So it was actually very important for us at the outset of the assignment to actually undertake a needs assessment to ensure that not only the FCDO program, working in close conjunction with Lagos State, understood the needs. We wanted to make sure that Lagos State itself had actually undertaken a needs assessment in the past. It was very interesting to see that the 2015 Lagos State Development Plan had key targets for the transportation sector, which is to improve the quality of life and to ensure increase in the state productivity by 2025. And this was through the provision of eco-friendly transport services, thereby reducing emissions, reduction in the commuting time and transportation costs for the citizens of Lagos State, increase access to basic social services, increased stakeholder participation, and then implementation of an integrated transport system. Following on from that, we had the 2019 Lagos Themes Agenda. As you can see, it applies to traffic management, health and environment, education and technology, and making Lagos a 21st century economy, entertainment and tourism, and security. So each of those headings spelt themes, and that is obviously to develop an alternative and diverse integrated transport system to stimulate a robust and sustainable economy by facilitating the movement of goods and services, improve the quality of life of commuters, and to enhance people's access to facilities and services. So all this really demonstrated that Lagos State was quite keen to actually achieve the key objectives of the FCDO program. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, this is really basically a snapshot of the urban and mobility and planning challenges we've had in Lagos over the years. Data, even though that's been improved with the data used to actually develop the 2015 master plan, but it is still an ongoing issue and something that we had to ensure. Traffic congestion, as you can see, land transport is mainly vehicle transport is still the dominant form. There's an uncompleted mass transit project for rail that really should have come on stream by 2021. Is still uncompleted. Urbanization and population growth, we still have a mass migration of not just Nigeria but the whole of West Africa is moving into Lagos, which is making it one of the fastest cities, as I said earlier on, in Africa. This has led to serious environmental pollution. Access to infrastructure is a problem. Urban poverty is increasing, and urban sprawl is increasing as well. And Lagos State has done quite a lot in terms of policy planning and actually improving the institutional framework, but it's still inadequate to meet the needs of the increasing population, which is putting a lot of pressure on access to land, which is of course having a great impact on climate change. Skills and capacity building, to be honest, Lagos, in comparison to all the other 36 states, is way ahead in terms of skills and capacity, which did make our job slightly easier, but there's always room for improvement. Next slide, please. Now, with the climate change and the environmental issues, again, Lagos State being a coastal state, of course, has serious pressure from the sea level rises, together with the heavy rainfall, which, to be honest, we have lots of water, but there's a shortage of potable drinking water. GHG emissions, which I mentioned, is growing. Loss of green areas due to the growth, and with regards to the waterways, we've had serious issues in relation to the oil spillages when it comes to the boat operators filling their tanks, and they've had a serious issue in relation to water hyacinths on the waterways, and of course we've had issues on economic, financial and political instability, road traffic congestion, as I mentioned, urban flood. So we've had this whole series of issues affecting this low-lying coastal region with lagoons and waterways, that we have to find a way to ensure that all that water is actually used in a very sustainable manner. Next, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, with regards to the licensing regime, Lagos Waterways licensing framework, which is hopefully meant to actually improve the introduction of the private sector operators to providing a more scheduled and improved ferry service, is mainly to try and shift the have an increased modal shift from road to water transport, improve route network planning through the integration with other land transport services to ensure seamless movement of passengers from water to rail to roads when the rail is completed, and to improve the legal and regulatory framework. And then we had to do a comprehensive review of all the laws to ensure that Lagos State does have the appropriate regulatory framework to actually introduce more improved private sector operators into the service. Improve safety, which is very high on our agenda in order to get the modal shift we're seeking. Integration of the existing informal operators. This was again critical from a job loss perspective and also a job creation perspective to ensure that the informal operators plug into this improved framework. And it's also important to note that it is impossible for us to try and introduce and improve ferry service without taking into account the existing operators who are actually providing a tremendous service to all the citizens of Lagos State, and they've done a tremendous work over the last 10 to 15 years in actually increasing the shift from road to water, even though there is room for improvement. So we had a transparent and competitive licensing framework which we've put in place to ensure that the international procurement best practice is adhered to, improving operational standards and practices, and other issues like GESI, stakeholder participation. Most importantly, to ensure that we do have a viable and sustainable ferry operations in Lagos State. Next slide, please. Now, moving away slightly from evidence-based planning to ensure that we do have reduced emissions with the introduction of the water transport system, we did try and ensure that at least apart from just simply passenger, we did have a scheme to actually improve the congestion of Lagos around the ports. Lagos being the major port in Lagos, in Nigeria. I think there's an estimated of 80% of all goods imported in Nigeria comes through Lagos, and the port congestion itself is costing the Nigerian economy 55 million a day and $9 billion a year in land congestion. The other one is actually related to port congestion. So our plan was to actually decongest the areas around Lagos by actually developing a greenfield freight terminal in Lagos, which we intend to actually concession out to the private sector through PPP, and that freight terminal will actually provide a gateway to the south and southeastern part of Nigeria. And it's very important because it provides an alternative route for the movement of cargo, as I said, to actually decongest the ports in Lagos. The plan is to move them by barges, which will again lead to substantial emissions reductions, and also to reduce the wear and tear and also road accidents around the port area. Next slide, please. As part of our program was to introduce a new ferry terminal at an area called Mile 12, and then we felt that this is an opportunity for us to actually come up with a green and energy efficient ferry terminal to actually demonstrate to Lagos State as to how all new ferry terminals should be built. It's actually built in an area where there's substantial urban sprawl, and it's swampy, and poor drainage systems make it incredibly difficult for the people in that area. There's a tremendous amount of road traffic congestion and poor access to the highway. So what we're trying to do is to try and come up with an improved area, improved housing, and improved access to waterways transport through our sustainable design, and which also has a lot of green and alternative energy solutions. It's going to be a phased development. The phase 1 will look at the passenger terminal building and the bus stations, and the phase 2 will look at a proposed introduction of another freight terminal in this part of Lagos State. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the market potential analysis. This is actually going back to the ferry transport services and the passengers. Right at the onset of the program, we were struck by the pandemic, and it was actually very difficult for us, or actually practically impossible for us, to carry out the surveys. So this market survey aspect of the study took part towards halfway through the program. So in the first part of the program, we had to use existing data in Lagos State to actually have a good idea on the movement of passengers before we eventually could actually conduct this particular survey. But you know, it is very important from a socio-economic perspective to understand the present ferry services, the movement demand, and geographic spread. You know, the passenger survey was to try and clarify the nature, characteristics, and diversity of the local transport demand in terms of volume, frequency, and the characteristics of the ferry users on the routes that we identified. And the customer survey was trying to really understand the current and future potential travel requirements for the commuters at the major bus stops and general and public communities close to water transport, to try and get a clear idea as to their view of water transport, and also speaking to marine professionals such as the farmers, the dredgers and loggers, and the tourism operators, all those who actually work within the waterways. The freight and cargo study was to identify the current market conditions, the potential demand, and the ideal location for the ferry cargo terminal. Next slide, please. The passenger survey highlights. We actually conducted over 2,500 interviews around the 9 jetties and terminals. 82% of the respondents chose to travel by ferry due to the faster speed, so that's an excellent point for us. And over 140,000 arrival and departure passenger trips were recorded in 1 week, which shows a growing demand. There was a tremendous amount of overcrowding during peak periods, and the demand is high on all the routes throughout the whole day. 4% of the respondents have disabilities, which is more than twice the Lagos State citizens reported to have disabilities at 1.8%. So that shows that the waterways traffic is actually, you know, reaching out to a lot of people with disabilities, which probably exist in the poor areas in Lagos. 78% of the respondents are not willing to pay a little extra for a fast and safer and more reliable ferry service. So that shows that price sensitivity is very important for the people of Lagos State. And 78% of the respondents took the ferry between 6 and 10 a.m., which obviously shows that we have that we're actually capturing a large amount of the working population in Lagos. The average waiting time before departure is between 5 to 10 minutes for 44%, and 27% wait time for 11 minutes. So it shows that there is scope for actually improving the loading and offloading of the passengers on the ferry systems. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So most of our data analysis and the demand was done using existing. This is actually prior to the market survey, as I mentioned, was done using the tremendous amount of information that we got from Lagos State. So what we did was really basically build on that. So we did an assessment of the ferry and the public transport routes relative to the population clusters, and then, as you can see, you know, we looked at all modes of transport, including the BRT, the bus, and the ferries, and the railway potentially, and also the monorail transport that's meant to be developed for the future part of Lagos. Next slide, please. We also assess the ferry and public transport routes relative to the poverty indices, which of course very important for us as we actually try and capture as many of the disadvantaged people as possible. Next slide, please. The Lagos travel demand characteristics were very important for us as well. So you can see that most of the transport moves from north to south, peak and off peak, and the south being the central business district, and also the island, as you can see at the bottom part. So we have a lot of people moving from the north to the south in the morning and the evening, from the south going back up north. So there's a tremendous opportunity to try and spread the population in Lagos to other areas, and that's why it's important for us to try and identify routes that can not only actually capture the existing traffic, but also open up other parts of Lagos State that really don't have accessibility to transport. Next slide, please. So the demand projection, very interesting, which was actually developed using the 4-stage demand model. This was done by our transport planner, and really what is actually very important here is that he looked at the trip generation. He saw it 0.6 trips per person per day, with the 2020 population within 30 minutes of travel time within the nearest ferry terminal. The trip distribution, the mode choice, the trip assignment, looking at areas, and also the choice in terms of bus or ferry. Looked at the bus fares, the bus journey times, the ferry journey times, and the ferry fares, and the trip distribution, looking at AM and PM peaks. And then it's looking at all the key routes on the waterways. You can see the difference between the AM and the PM, and also the midday route. So you can see there's a lot of movement both on AM and peak travel. So that enabled us to actually develop the passenger demand model that was eventually updated by the time we completed the market study halfway through the program. Next slide, please. So all that data was now used as the basis for the ranking and route prioritization, which we sat down very closely with Lagos State to come up with the assessment criteria. So we looked at things like the potential demand, intermodal access, travel time, navigational constraints on the waterways, and existing terminal infrastructure in order to rank the routes that we all assessed. And we came up with 4 prioritized routes, which you can see are basically north to south, east to west, and also west to east, everything converging towards the central part of Lagos. Next slide, please. And once we had actually prioritized the routes, the next thing we needed to do was to work with LAMATA, that is the Lagos Metropolitan Transport Authority, who are responsible for the development of transportation in Lagos State. So we had to ensure that LASWA, which is the Waterways Authority, worked very closely with LAMATA to ensure that there was an integration of the ferry routes in Lagos, obviously to improve the last mile connectivity for the seamless movement of passengers, to provide bus priority measures at the major congestion points, and to provide transit-orientated development opportunities at the strategic ferry terminals, supporting an economic growth within those particular areas, as I said, to try and spread out the population of Lagos from the condensed central area, and also to improve access for the poorer waterside communities in Lagos. Next slide, please. the freight market analysis, this is actually very important, because before we introduced the new inland port within Lagos, we had to understand all the ports, not only within the western area of Nigeria, but also within Lagos State itself. So we looked at the existing ports and existing port throughput, the competing port roads network and infrastructure, the existing port future cargo throughput relative to the proposed terminal, the proposed freight terminal future market share relative to the existing port infrastructure, and the potential impact of the proposed terminal in relation to the new Lekki deep sea port, which is under construction, and the existing port infrastructure. So, looking at all the ports in the area, and also the ports in West Africa, I think we came up with an assumption that it will probably have a 13.2% market share, because the strategic location of this inland port that we identified will actually open up the eastern and south areas of Nigeria, as opposed to the over concentration of the development of transportation linking the southwest to the northern parts of Nigeria. Next slide, please. Desired outcomes. Next slide. This is when I hand you over to my colleague Adeola to take you through the carbon reduction assumptions that we made for ferry transport and for freight transport. Over to you, Adeola. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Keke, and good day, everyone. I will just take off from where Keke left off. Basically, for all the scenarios that he has presented, we attempted to estimate what carbon emission reductions can be obtainable from there. In doing that, we had to apply a number of assumptions, but mostly for road transport, we erred on the part of caution, as in we took the best case in all cases. For example, our data for fuel consumption is based on manufacturers' information, but of course, as we all know, most of the vehicles in Nigeria are not new, and so fuel consumption information may not necessarily be accurate. So more likely than not, the vehicles will consume more fuel than we have used for the purpose of this calculation. Similarly, we've assumed a seamless travel time. If you look at the distance between Ikorodu and the 5 carry terminal, which is about 65 kilometers. If you are traveling at 60 kilometers per hour, you should be there in about 1 hour. But more often than not, it takes not less than 2 hours to make that trip. So, but we, for the purpose of our calculations, we have worked with 1 hour, or I mean, just assuming that it will take regular time to travel. So, on the strength of that, we tried to compare what the emissions will be for boat transport versus using buses and cars. And as you can see from that table, one boat will carry 100 passengers on each trip. And over a year of 260 working days, assuming that their weekends are not included in the calculation, it will, the boats will carry about 3.4 million people to and fro, one way or the other, over a distance of about 30 kilometers. So basically what we see from this is that first, using the waterways reduces the distance considerably. While travel by water is just 30 kilometers, is about 60 kilometers by road. Now, added to that is the length of time that is lost in traffic signals and all what's not. So, next slide, please. So based on that, we've been able to estimate the emissions reductions that could result from using boats versus using buses and cars for transport. As we can see, for each liter of petrol that is combusted, you get 2.3 kg of carbon dioxide. Of course, there are other gases with even higher global warming potentials than CO2, but because CO2 is by far the largest in terms of volume, everything is converted to CO2 equivalent. And so while boat transport is yielding 2.3 kg per liter of fuel, the cars and buses are yielding about 2.6 kg of CO2 per trip. Please, next slide. Okay, so based on those information, we can see that going by boats can yield up to 53% reduction in CO2 emissions annually, because we get as much as about 7,744 tons of CO2 emissions by boats over a 1-year period. But you get as much as 16,000 tons of CO2 if you use cars and buses to convey the same number of passengers over this period. So on the average, emissions per passenger comes in at about 2.5 kg per person, per passenger, while it comes in at about 4.6 kg per person using cars and buses combined. Next slide, please. Now, we also did a calculation for estimated emission reductions for the freight terminal. Interestingly, the distance by road as well as by water to the freight terminal is almost exactly the same. So 60 kilometers each way. Now, again, we erred on the path of caution by assuming that, one, the trucks are performing optimally, and therefore their fuel consumption and by extension emissions are exactly as designed and manufactured by the manufacturers. We also assumed that there is no time lost in traffic, but of course we know that sometimes for a single truck to make its way out of the Apapa port, it can remain almost standstill for as much as 3 hours before even getting out of the port complex. And then, but we just assumed that the distance covered, regardless of how much time it's taking, is the same. And we calculated based on distance. But the interesting thing we saw is that one single tugboat can push barges laden with cargo that will require as many as 2,200 trucks to move. So on the strength of that, if we calculate based on emission information provided, fuel consumption information provided by manufacturers, we'll see that one single tugboat pushing 40 barges will move what 2,200 trucks would ordinarily move. And it will do so within a period of 2.5 hours. Now, you then see that emission is about 1/6 of what would arise if the road transport, as in using trucks, were employed. So basically, the summary of everything that we have seen from the calculations we carried out for the purpose of this project is that it's a win-win situation all the way. Apart from the emissions reductions, there are also large-scale improved health and safety benefits for the entire populace if we increase the use of the waterways. So ultimately, it's a win-win situation for everybody concerned as far as the project is concerned. So on that basis, I will like to return to KK to round up the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Adiolu. Just a couple more slides to go. Next slide, please. So really, lessons for the cities is collaboration and stakeholder consultation with the city officials is essential. We worked extremely close with Lagos State Government and also the other key stakeholders. Project goals and visions need to be properly articulated for implementation. There's an increasing need for data access and availability. So not only do we use the existing data in Lagos, we actually improved on that. Access to private capital is critical to mitigate the impact of climate change. And that actually brings me on to the fact that the Lagos Waterways Intervention has achieved a Track 1 status with this cities investment facility developed by UN Habitat. It's a multi-stakeholder and participation partner-driven initiative focused on unlocking institutional capital to finances for sustainable development. So that means that the Lagos Waterways project has a tremendous opportunity to actually showcase itself to the international financing community. Enabling policy and international institutional framework should be provided by the city officials, which has been done by LASWA, and the need for the continuous public sector capacity building. We had an extensive capacity building program with the Lagos State counterpart. Next slide, please. Finally, just really before we leave, we shouldn't forget that really this is a this is a private sector initiative to try and get private sector interested in the waterways. So we've identified various opportunities: ferry transport, passenger operations, the freight terminal development, the TOD, boat building, barge operations, and green energy efficient design and solutions, and of course IT solutions. So really where we are now is LASWA is to license ferry operators and to secure land for the enabling works and infrastructure for the freight terminal, and then we're about to commence the PPP procurement process for the licensing of the ferry operations and the concession of the freight terminal. And the plan is to partner with developers and investors and ferry operators to provide equity and debt financing to be supported, hopefully by the CIF facility. So really the opportunities, we've broken them down further from like a property perspective, from industrial, commercial, and actually residential. Industrial, of course, are the terminal operations and also the industrial parks. The commercial property, we're looking at the within the TOD, that's the passenger terminal, retail, malls and stores, office spaces, entertainment centers, and a multi-story car park. And we have the residential, low-cost housing, and middle-income apartments for the areas where we have a lot of condensed population. Next slide, please. So I think that's it from us. Thank you very much, and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thanks, thanks, Kayode and Adilu. That was really impressive body of work. Thanks for sharing. So now is the time for the Q&A and discussion. I see that there's already been a bit of conversation happening in the chat and some questions posed. So can I ask that all the presenters be available to answer questions now? And let's just dig right into some of the questions that have already been raised in the chat. Ryan, is there anything particular that you want to raise?
Yes, thanks, Greg. I think Vidhi Mohan had a question that she would like to ask herself, so maybe she could unmute and ask at this point.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. I'm Vidhi Mohan. I was part of the the Lagos ferry team working with Kayode, but currently I'm working as an urban transport advisor in Tbilisi, Georgia. I'm an advisor to the Tbilisi City Hall. Now, my question really is to all the panelists and to maybe everyone who's on this presentation. One of the big challenges we face is obviously in trying to push a sustainable transport agenda is getting this cultural shift of getting people away out of their cars and into other forms of transport, ideally public transport. But in a lot of cities we're all working on, and it's especially true in the former Soviet republics, and I'm sure it's true in Nigeria as well. Is the car is really seen as a status symbol? It's seen as a form of progress, a form of growth. I mean, for example, in a country like Georgia during the Soviet times, most people were like just simply didn't have access or the ability to own a car. And when the country opened up, everybody now has a car and they want to use it. It's seen as a form of progress. So how can we actually try to change this mindset of getting people out of their cars? And the danger for us is, coming from the UK or Europe, is to trying to seem a bit sort of patronizing and preachy and telling people what to do. So how do we achieve this sort of fundamental change, and without, trying to, offend people, and without trying to, and actually delivering some positive results? I mean, I'm just interested in whether there are sort of specific schemes people have looked at in other countries which might work. I mean, I was really interested in the education piece from the lady from Malaysia. So it's really just a very open question, and I would be interested in people's views on this. Thanks.
Thank you. That's really a fantastic question. Does anyone on the panel particularly want to take that one?
I could try, Greg. Maybe some food for thought at least. So yeah, I've also had a background in establishing the London congestion charging scheme, but I certainly wouldn't recommend that as a panacea. It works in certain environments, but certainly signalling the disbenefit of private transport can be challenging. I don't think I'd have a policy which only depends on that. High quality public transport is really what matters here, and high quality is not about the quality of the buses. It's about quality of the service itself. So looking at public transport as a service rather than a fleet of buses is a lesson learned by many cities. I'm looking at Jakarta, in Santiago de Chile, and even in Cape Town as well. So that's certainly, and also making sure that the quality considers predictability of journey time, access to buses, whether it's paper tickets or more electronic or smart tickets, having the means of communicating with users in a very simple way, so they're not wasting time waiting, even if buses are maybe infrequent, and maybe some on demand as well. So, and sometimes regulation can cut that off at an early stage. So flexible regulation helps drive innovation. It can actually create those small community solutions around shuttles, for example. So it's that needs to be introduced to the point when people see that maybe they have some money in their pockets and maybe they should invest that in maybe accessing public transport instead. But
thanks, Andrew. I see that Kayode has his hand up, perhaps to add to that.
Yeah, excellent question, Vidya. You know, it's something that we've been trying to tackle in Lagos State, but I'm sure you recall that with the introduction of the BRT BRT light in Lagos around the along the key spine in Lagos. We were surprised with the modal shift, and also the increased white-collared workers who use the improved public transport service. Lamart has got very impressive statistics demonstrating this particular modal shift. Now you find that possibly in certain countries in the initial stages, like we had in Lagos, where the car was a status symbol, but now with the increasing removal of the fuel subsidy in Lagos, and that's obviously increasing the cost of actually maintaining a car. Time in terms of the congestion, very soon people will be tired of just sitting in a car for 4 or 5 hours a day whilst you see fast moving public transport whizzing past you. I think that can have a tremendous impact on someone's mode choice. So I think eventually, as we strive to improve public transport services, that would hopefully, together with the points raised early on, will actually improve the modal shift that we all seek.
Thanks for that, and Kamisa.
Okay, so if I may also add, the seeming apathy to use public transport is particularly waterways is not so much because it's not fast, as much as the fact that there is need for intermodal connectivity. For example, if a passenger disembarks at the 5 Cowrie, is there a ready means of transport immediately from the 5 Cowrie to the next destination? So those are some of the other issues that the global program will be looking into to ensure that there is almost seamless connection between one mode of transport and the other. Thank you.
Well, I totally agree with some of the points highlighted by other speakers. But I guess at the same time, I think when it comes to awareness and education, we have to start early for our younger generation to appreciate, transportation and low carbon. So even in some of the programs that we actually implement, we focus in terms of, young people education. And of course, when we talk about public transport infrastructure, the last mile connectivity is very important. So this needs very cohesive plans. Even we at the regional level requires local authorities to work with us, especially in the provision of the last mile connectivity and infrastructure that ensure a very smooth transition or safe facilities for the public.
Great, thank you for that. I see some other questions are popping up. Ryan.
Yeah. So this was a question by Naomi for Kamisa again. She asks, how is the low carbon strategy being integrated in the GFCP project on integrated mobility systems?
Kamisa, that's for you.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Okay, in the GFCP programs, part of the component in the smart integrated mobility is looking at emission. Therefore, actually, I think the need to integrate some of the work that we do in terms of GHG reporting also have to align with whatever that our smart integrated mobility will actually on how it will be implemented in the future. So I believe in terms of low carbon, there are a lot of elements that can be integrated, because our low carbon society blueprint, there are specific strategies in terms of integrated green transportation, which look at even on the demand management, ITS infrastructure, and so on. So it is something that we need to actually embed and integrate when we do the plans for the what you call on the STEAMS plan under the GFCP program.
Tommy said just on that, just really quickly, just wanted to sort of build on that. So if there are other city authorities or regions in this call now, and they're interested in doing something similar to what you're currently doing in Iskandar, could you actually share some risks or challenges that you, I suppose, would tell them, and I guess in terms of advice?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we started the low carbon initiative in Iskandar, Malaysia, the major thing is that we do not have any point of reference, because we are the first city who's doing it. So we got a lot of help from other Japanese cities at that point, and also universities. And I think while looking at the various aspects in terms of low carbon implementation, I think the major challenges would be, even when we do the assessment recently, is about the financial part of it in terms of establishment of incentives, subsidies, and taxation framework, because it's not there at national level. So we do not have point of reference on how to further accelerate some of the program that we do. And then when it comes to technology, the identification of appropriate technology that is suitable, to the local content. So that is also, and the knowledge and expertise for generating and managing innovation and technological capacity. That is also something that, we now identify as an area that we need to actually improve or do something, to ensure that we can sustain whatever program that we are doing. And then human capital, collaboration and partnership. So there are actually quite a number of challenges in terms of, to actually implement low carbon, because I think even at national level, we started in 2012. Only recently, there's clear policy direction and also roadmap at national level. So actually, there are many challenges, but I'm sure as we move along, actually, we implement a lot of initiatives, because we managed to bring other local authorities, we managed to bring other agencies and also private sector to come together with us to actually implement some of these things, because we are able to communicate the benefits of low carbon and how this actually align to some of the agenda, either at state level or national level. Yes, back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So next is a question for Kayode. This is from Maria Hardanti, who is interested in green port management and asks whether the strategy for Lagos includes only the port facilities or also connecting transport in and out of the port.
Yeah, excellent question. That as you could see, the identification of the freight terminal ensured that we actually considered both the feeder to the port and also the evacuation from the port as well. So the feeder from the port, you could see the emission calculations done by my colleague, ideally in relation to the movement of the barges from the Apapa port to the freight terminal. And what we didn't show, unfortunately, was the planned route from the evacuation from that particular freight terminal to the main corridor leading to the eastern part of Nigeria and the south-south. So yes, the integration with the land transport and also the waterways transport leading to and from the terminals, absolutely critical with regards to determining the emissions emissions calculations and the potential CO2 emissions reductions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kayode. Another question from Maria, this time for Andrew. There was some discussion on this in the chat, but it's a pertinent question and could use some, I think, further clarification. So in the Bandung Transport project, it was found that early introduction to a new ticketing system would negatively impact women passengers who are currently the core public transport passengers. And was there any similar assessment that was done in Vietnam, and how is this being combated?
We looked at women and a range of vulnerable user groups. So obviously we approached the civil society organisations, including the Women's Union in Ho Chi Minh. So we're looking at all of these groups together. So obviously we found that women tend to travel off-peak, those that are bound to the home. We also found that there was a high usage of stat tickets that were distributed amongst members of the family. We also looked at we looked at people with disability also. So we're looking at a range of needs, and actually the differences between needs were actually quite nuanced. So we actually took that collective view and then started to test the findings against the emergence of the fair policy, which we put on the so-called Task 3, and also the technical standards framework, which was sat under Task 2. And it was actually quite surprised to see the opportunities to embrace all of those nuanced needs from those CSOs in all of our work, including replicating existing ticket types, because I think a switch from existing ticket types and removing those that people have actually got used to, maybe people have actually made long-term decisions about where they live in terms of their perceived quality access to public transport. So that's replication of existing with the new virtual or electronic form of tickets. Preserving cash options also helps, preserving the stack tickets, the book of tickets that we mentioned. And in the demonstration project, which we will kick off in January, we are looking at enabling a civil society organisation to have an account effectively to actually gain an exemption or discount, and then to grant that exemption to its members. So that's one thing we're trialing. And we of course, ambition exceeded our capabilities, because we were looking at creating, reflecting some of those user groups more than others. You know, we had limited time in our project, but I think we've captured everything we had to in both the technical views and fair policy, including women. Happy to engage separately after this meeting if you wish.
Thanks, Andrew.
Ryan, perhaps one more question. We're running just a slightly over schedule here. Thanks.
So I think all the questions were answered, but just one that came up right in the end was whether the new kids on the block, electric vehicles and driverless vehicles, and whether their rollout would be detrimental to public transport patronage, and that the environmental safe use would be for EV rather than enthusiasm about public transport. And this was for Andrew, but I think it can also be pretty open-ended.
Sure.
Okay, I'll give a short response in that case, and allow others to contribute. So I gave an initial response, was electromobility is actually quite neutral in principle. It can be applied to any form of transport. If you look at vehicle types, then you find there's a retrofit market around three-wheelers. Two-wheelers can be converted, or so we can actually be procured as EVs with little change to the vehicle design. Hydrogen is probably more suited to long-distance buses and trucks. So electromobility covers a broad raft of vehicle types, but it's actually the purpose of the trip has a large determinant on the fuel type that is used. Autonomous vehicles, it's challenging, because if you mix autonomy with shared vehicles, then suddenly, if you have an app-based access to shared autonomous vehicles, a single button press could actually drive usage. And that has been shown through the advent of shared vehicles themselves in New York and arguably in London, that's actually been driven up the activity levels of those vehicles, and therefore contributing to congestion. So TfL, as I mentioned, has an excellent guidance note on how autonomy can be introduced, that people offering autonomous shuttle services, they have to be presented in a way which demonstrates that they will be supportive of public mobility needs. In other words, it should be transport for the public. And if a shuttle service is offered, then it is for public benefit. If it's autonomous, then, well, what does it do? It reduces operating costs. It may not, it can actually, with convenience, increase congestion. So I think autonomy can be seen to be rather neutral, except when it comes to operating costs. So these are opportunities rather than challenges, I submit, but I think you've raised some important concerns there.
Thanks, Andrew. Did any of the other presenters want to add to that?
I think it was well covered. Thanks.
I think we're going to be discussing this for the next 10 to 15 years, autonomy and sharing, connectivity and electromobility.
Yes. Well, just a bit of what you were just saying there just makes me think about the old saying goes, a most sustainable transport plan is a good land use plan. And we can talk about technology, but it's really about making sure our land use is right and getting those trips down so that people have better access to services.
So I think that the biggest impact is probably shared transport as opposed to autonomous transport, because if you can deliver the same capacity with fewer vehicles, then do you repurpose car parks? Do you build for a pick-up drop-off society? Do you ensure that your road, which has a life of 50 to 70 years, is adaptive enough to embrace fewer vehicles? How do we introduce pick-up drop-off? How do you manage curb usage and competition for curb usage? So some big questions. What happens to fuel tax with electromobility? So many questions on the horizon we should address in the next few years.
Sounds like we need another session.
Another 2 hours. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks everyone for taking part in this. It's been a really interesting conversation. I really appreciate everyone's participation today. Before you go, I really would like you to, again, scan this code here, or go to menti.com and use the code at the bottom of the page. This is just to provide some feedback to us. It's anonymous, so no one will see your response. This will really inform us here at the Global Future Cities program and to try to make these events as useful as possible. So thank you so much, everyone, and then have a good morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the world.
Thank you very much, Gregory, for hosting, and thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks,
Bye.
Greg.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Good job.
everyone.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Greg.
All the speakers.
All right, thanks, everyone. Bye.